People feel that they can come and spend some time here. I've seen people with a stack of Sunday newspapers. I've seen people making things. I've seen people reading things, people doing their homework. It's been surprising how people have responded to the space and feel that they can spend time here or come back. It's not typical to go back to an exhibition many times, really. It's because of the music, obviously, not because of the paintings. The paintings don't change, but the music does. The theme of the show was to be music. We knew that from the start, really. And so the paintings, for the most part, are connected somehow to either the making of music, where music that I like comes from, or people making music. If I think back to when I was at high school, I was making sort of imaginary type album covers for bands and things like that. All the way through, the first works I made when I came to London were paintings of musicians I'd seen performing in the clubs in London, and jazz musicians, actually.
We started to have conversations about music, and I was in Seoul, and there is a new museum in Seoul called the Audeum, which is basically a gigantic listening station, and you go from room to room, and it's a quite extraordinary experience because the opposite of what one would expect is actually the case, because one would of course expect the technology to get better and better and better, but actually the more you kind of go through time, the more you realize that some of these extraordinary sound systems of cinema from the 30s and 40s and 50s, or even earlier, have an embodiment which we completely lack in our time. They're really extraordinary. And I told Peter about this visit, and Peter mentioned that he has been interested in this for such a long time.
So I told Hans Ulrich about my sound system, which was an old cinema sound system, and also Lawrence Passera's sound system. Lawrence and I have been working together over the last 4 or 5 years. These systems are actually very sculptural. I really like the fact that they were designed not to be seen. They're always designed to be behind the screen. I thought maybe they could be revealed in an exhibition situation.
There's only a handful of these left in the world because they were thrown away by the time you get to the 50s. This is such a unique sonic presentation. There's no modern equivalent today. Music culture changes, rock and roll comes in, bass frequencies extend, speaker design changes. There's things about this that make it special, not just sonically, but also the way you have to understand it and use it. On the speakers, there's no plus and minus. You have to work out what the phase is. So this is not like a modern club sound system. This is not like a hi-fi system. This is not like something you'd have in your home. I joke with friends that years ago, this was an interest that became a passion, that became an obsession, that sort of became a madness, and then became an illness, and then you become an expert because you have one of these in your house, right? And so when Peter asked me, I was like, "You're kidding, you want me to move this into a gallery?" To be seeing this out of the context that I'm used to presenting it in and take it out into the wider world and seeing the effect that that's having is a whole new experience.
Peter really wanted to open up the space to other collaborators. He's very interested in other disciplines in his practice and their influence. So it was very important for him from the get-go to introduce musicians, record collectors, artists to bring their piece of their music collection and play it in this show. So sound service happens on Sundays and on selected weekdays and weekends. And it's a program where those musicians or collectors or artists bring a part of their collection to Serpentine, and for about an hour, hour and a half, or sometimes actually for a whole day, they play their music.
I was intrigued to see what people would bring into the space, really. And it has to be said, it was a bit of an experiment. I've never done it before. And I was also quite nervous about what the response would be, whether people would think it was a sort of, I don't know, pretentious idea, or is it a sort of gimmick in a sense. But I've been happy in the way that people have responded to it, and some people have brought in music as a response to the work.
paintings are very static, but your reading of them doesn't necessarily need to be. It's a very different experience when you listen to Chopin and look at a painting to when you listen to a soca song and look at a painting. You know, it brings such a different energy. You really don't see the same show twice because the emotional response to the music is so different.
I mean, on average, people do actually not spend a lot of time in front of an artwork. I think a statistic was published a few years ago that people in a museum on average spend maybe 15 seconds in front of an artwork. And artists have, of course, always been very interested in this idea, how one could liberate time, how could one actually create a situation in an exhibition where the viewer would spend much, much more time.
In here, we've seen people sometimes even sitting down on the armchairs and sometimes even having a nap, which I absolutely loved. For me, that was the highlight, I think, of knowing that we've achieved what we wanted to, because that meant that people just felt so comfortable, that they almost felt like they're in their own living room.
The dark space was really designed for the painting Music of the Future, which I thought was very important for the exhibition, even though it's an older work. And I've never really been 100% happy with the way it's been exhibited before in the past, because it's always in a white room and it's often sort of overlit. But here we had a chance to sort of experiment a bit, and in my mind anyway, it looks the best it has looked, because it comes out of darkness, which is really what the painting was trying to achieve in its kind of concept. Some of the paintings are quite personal in a sort of domestic kind of way. They depict places that we live in. That, I guess, was in a way of having a sort of center, a center that was about me and my family and my own experience, really. A lot of the other paintings are responses, and I think that the two speaker paintings with figures on either side of them was really almost like first responses of arriving back in Trinidad, having not been there for over 30 years, and sort of just the excitement of discovering the music and all the culture that surrounds it, really, and just how natural people are with their music and how it sits in their environment. Sound systems in landscapes. It's not something you really think of so much here, I guess maybe in a festival environment, but there's no there's no barrier, really. And it's important that it's a bodily experience, I think. I mean, otherwise, why would it be being played so loud? The lion motif is also, very much connected to music. I first thought about using the lion motif after seeing many depictions of the Lion of Judah in Trinidad on walls, on T-shirts, posters. It's quite prevalent, really. There's even a graffiti artist in Port of Spain called Ghost who made, very, very untypical, almost like expressionist type paintings on the walls of all buildings, using a lion motif that would sort of meld into Rastafarian men's heads, and very, very striking. And obviously that's something that appears on many record covers. But the lion also came from seeing the captive lions in the zoo in Port of Spain. And then there's a connection too with prisoners who I got to meet and got to know a bit in Port of Spain. And just this sort of incarceration and freedom. What does freedom mean? This exhibition has proven that there's maybe a different audience for exhibitions if sound is involved, if music's involved. It invites people who maybe think they don't have a lot in common with either contemporary art or contemporary painting, but they know a lot about music. Everyone knows a lot about music. It's a way in. It's a way in to in a way experience something maybe they wouldn't normally experience. The title of the show, House of Music, comes from a lyric by Shadow, Winston Bailey, Trinidadian musician. He has a song called Soca Boat, and in the song, he's kind of talking about the system that kind of rules the airwaves in Trinidad, and he's a renegade within that system. He was never typical. He was always, in a way, fighting and had a different type of voice, but was still belonged to the House of Music.
I belong to the House of Music. Be I that crazy or else sick. I don't want to sing that soca boat.